The old Bentley purred gently as it approached the imposing gates of Blackwood Hall, an estate cloaked in shadows, whispers, and age-old secrets. Miss Jane Marple peered out from the car window, taking in the grandeur and solemn dignity of the sprawling manor. Ivy clung tenaciously to the ancient stone walls, and towering oak trees lined the gravel driveway, their branches intertwining overhead like skeletal fingers. Despite the midsummer sun, a chill seemed to envelop the hall, brushing against her neck with a faint whisper. As the car drew to a halt in front of the grand entrance, Lord Blackwood himself descended the wide marble steps to greet her. Tall and thin, with eyes as penetrating as they were enigmatic, he gave a courteous bow. "Miss Marple, a pleasure. Welcome to Blackwood Hall." "Thank you, Lord Blackwood," Miss Marple replied, with a gentle smile, noting the strained lines around his mouth and the careful way he moved, suggesting pain or illness. Inside, the hall was even more impressive, filled with relics of past grandeur, rich tapestries, imposing portraits, and antique furniture, all softly illuminated by muted lamplight. Lord Blackwood guided her into the drawing room, where several family members had gathered. "Allow me to introduce my relatives," Lord Blackwood said, a faintly sardonic edge creeping into his voice. Miss Marple's keen gaze scanned the faces. Lady Olivia, a formidable woman whose sharp eyes missed nothing. Percy Blackwood, Lord Blackwood's cousin, smiling warmly, yet there was a trace of something calculating in his expression. Young Amelia, nervous and withdrawn, and Edward, whose indifferent air suggested profound boredom. Miss Marple greeted each politely, noticing immediately the undercurrents of tension running through the assembled group. Servants moved silently, their expressions guarded, avoiding eye contact as if fearful of revealing too much. After introductions, Lord Blackwood invited Miss Marple for tea. As they sat in the conservatory, surrounded by lush but oddly foreboding plants, Lord Blackwood leaned forward slightly. "Miss Marple, you've surely heard rumours about Blackwood Hall." Miss Marple sipped her tea calmly. "Indeed, Lord Blackwood, it seems to be quite legendary." "Legendary," he echoed, his voice dry. "Strange occurrences, ghostly apparitions. They say the place is haunted, but I fear the living are far more troubling." "Troubling in what sense?" Miss Marple queried softly. Lord Blackwood hesitated, eyes distant. "Greed, deceit. Families like ours always harbour darker truths beneath their polished surfaces." Their conversation was interrupted by the abrupt arrival of Percy Blackwood. "Forgive my intrusion," he said, with an overly apologetic smile. "I wanted to ensure our esteemed guest is comfortable." "Quite comfortable," Miss Marple replied mildly, her eyes twinkling in gentle observation. Percy's eyes flickered briefly, suggesting irritation masked behind polite interest. "Excellent," he said lightly. "Do beware of our famous draughts and mysterious footsteps, though. They add a certain charm to our humble abode." Miss Marple smiled, noting the tension that flared briefly in Lord Blackwood's eyes. She recognized such exchanges, hidden meanings beneath cordial conversation. There was something Percy wanted from Lord Blackwood, something he had yet to obtain. Dinner was served later in the grand dining room, a room whose heavy chandeliers cast long, flickering shadows upon solemn portraits lining the walls. The conversation was strained, punctuated by polite exchanges filled with veiled innuendos about inheritance and responsibility. After dinner, Miss Marple took a brief stroll along the corridor, her senses alert. She noticed a servant, an older woman named Mrs. Jennings, whispering anxiously with another staff member. Their hurried silence upon seeing her confirmed her suspicions. There was indeed something very wrong at Blackwood Hall. She paused at the library door, slightly ajar, and was intrigued by muffled voices emanating from within. Quietly, she pushed the door open just enough to glimpse Percy and Edward locked in a tense conversation. "You're playing a dangerous game," Edward hissed, his face twisted with suppressed anger. "Lord Blackwood will find out eventually." Percy smirked coldly. "And who exactly would inform him?" "You? You wouldn't dare risk your inheritance." Edward clenched his fists, visibly struggling to control his temper. "You underestimate the old man. He's sharper than you give him credit for." Percy leaned closer, eyes glittering ominously in the lamplight. "He won't be sharp enough to discover anything before it's too late. Now, stay quiet and mind your own affairs, or suffer the consequences." Miss Marple withdrew silently, her mind racing. Clearly something sinister was unfolding, something that Percy was willing to threaten for. Her resolve strengthened as she returned to her room, determined to uncover the depth of the conspiracy at Blackwood Hall. Later that night, Miss Marple woke suddenly, startled by a soft creaking sound. She rose quietly, reaching for her shawl, and opened her door cautiously. The corridor was empty, bathed in moonlight filtering through high windows. Moving silently toward the sound, she glimpsed Lady Olivia slipping discreetly down a side hallway. Curiosity piqued, Miss Marple followed at a safe distance. Lady Olivia stopped before an ornate mirror, pressing something unseen. To Miss Marple's astonishment, the mirror slid aside, revealing a hidden passage. Olivia disappeared into the darkness, the mirror silently closing behind her. Miss Marple stood frozen momentarily, heart racing. Blackwood Hall held even deeper secrets than she had suspected. Determinedly, she noted the passage's location and swiftly returned to her room, her resolve firming. The estate's mysteries were mounting, and she was determined to unravel them all. Miss Jane Marple arrives at the ominous Blackwood Hall, a grand but eerie estate steeped in shadowy legends and whispered secrets. As her Bentley approaches the ivy-draped manor, the midsummer sun seems powerless against the chill clinging to the air, as if the house itself rejects warmth. She is greeted at the steps by Lord Blackwood, a tall, gaunt figure whose eyes conceal more than they reveal. His polite welcome is tinged with weariness, hinting at unspoken troubles. Inside, the hall is majestic, but heavy with a sense of fading grandeur. Rich tapestries and ancient portraits line the walls, whispering of a proud but troubled lineage. Lord Blackwood introduces Miss Marple to his assembled family, the piercing-eyed Lady Olivia, charming but calculating cousin Percy, timid Amelia, and disinterested Edward. Immediately, Miss Marple senses underlying tension among them. Polite smiles, failing to conceal personal rivalries and old resentments. Even the servants seem uneasy, their silence speaking volumes. Tea in the conservatory offers Lord Blackwood a chance to speak more candidly. He refers to the estate's haunted reputation, but dismisses the supernatural. "It's not the dead that worry me," he says. "It's the living." He hints at deception and greed, suggesting that the family's problems run deeper than local ghost stories. Before he can say more, Percy intrudes with exaggerated politeness, casting a thin veil over his clear intent to monitor the conversation. Dinner that evening is a tense affair. Beneath formal conversation lies a current of suspicion, as veiled comments allude to inheritance, illness, and future claims to the estate. Miss Marple observes carefully, noting which glances linger too long and which smiles seem too practiced. Later, during a quiet walk through the corridors, Miss Marple stumbles upon more than she expected. She overhears Percy and Edward in a hushed, heated argument inside the library. Percy warns Edward to stay silent, implying that something sinister is already in motion, something Lord Blackwood is unaware of, but that could have dire consequences if revealed. Intrigued and alarmed, Miss Marple continues her discreet investigation. That night, a faint creak awakens her. She quietly follows the sound and witnesses Lady Olivia slipping down a hallway and activating a hidden mechanism in a mirror, revealing a secret passage. Stunned, Miss Marple marks the location and returns to her room, certain now that Blackwood Hall holds more secrets than anyone has let on. What began as a polite visit has quickly become something far more perilous. The legendary estate is not just haunted by the past, it may soon be the stage for betrayal, conspiracy, and perhaps murder, and Miss Marple is determined to uncover the truth lurking in its darkened halls. Morning sunlight slipped timidly through heavy curtains, casting gentle patterns on Miss Marple's bedroom walls. She had slept fitfully, her mind persistently returning to the clandestine activities she'd witnessed the previous night. Dressing swiftly, she descended the grand staircase to find breakfast laid out elegantly in the dining room, though most family members appeared notably absent. Lord Blackwood sat alone at the head of the table, face pale, visibly fatigued. He offered her a weak smile, gesturing politely to the seat beside him. "Good morning, Miss Marple. I trust you found your accommodation satisfactory, despite our household's eccentricities." "Quite satisfactory, thank you," Miss Marple replied warmly, observing the dark circles beneath his eyes. "Though I must confess, your estate has proven most intriguing." Lord Blackwood sighed, pushing away his half-eaten meal. "Intriguing is one way of putting it, I suppose. Unfortunately, it is these intrigues that weigh so heavily on my health." At that moment, Mr. Travers, the family solicitor, was announced. A portly, methodical man, he entered carrying a briefcase, eyes sharp with a professional detachment. "Good morning," he greeted briskly. "I apologize for disturbing your breakfast, Lord Blackwood, but as you requested, I am here to discuss urgent matters concerning your estate." Lord Blackwood nodded solemnly. "Indeed. Please proceed, Mr. Travers." Clearing his throat, the solicitor seated himself and began cautiously. "As you are aware, the new will you signed recently has inexplicably vanished. Every precaution was taken, yet the document has disappeared without a trace." Miss Marple's ears perked with immediate interest. She sipped her tea, carefully watching Lord Blackwood's reaction. The old man's face darkened noticeably, eyes clouded by worry. "Impossible," he murmured. "It was secured carefully, locked away." "Precisely," Travers concurred, his brow furrowing deeply. "Its disappearance suggests something deliberate and malicious. Given your current state of health and the family dynamics, the implications are rather disturbing." The door opened suddenly, revealing Percy, Lady Olivia, Amelia and Edward entering together, each casting wary glances toward the conversation taking place. Percy immediately addressed Lord Blackwood, feigning casual concern. "I heard Mr. Travers had arrived. Has the elusive will finally reappeared?" Travers shook his head grimly. "Regrettably not, Mr. Blackwood." Percy's expression faltered momentarily before being quickly masked by practiced neutrality. Miss Marple noted the fleeting reaction, a crucial slip that deepened her suspicions. Lady Olivia stepped forward imperiously. "Perhaps it would be wise, Travers, to remind everyone exactly what was stipulated in this missing document." Travers hesitated, glancing uncertainly at Lord Blackwood, who nodded slowly. "Very well. The new will significantly altered the distribution of the estate. Lord Blackwood's wishes were quite explicit. The bulk of Blackwood Hall was to pass not to a family member, but rather to someone outside the immediate family circle." The silence that followed was charged with tension, each family member assessing one another covertly. Edward's fists clenched briefly, Amelia's eyes widened with shock, and Lady Olivia's lips pressed together into a thin, white line. Percy's reaction was the most controlled, his features carefully arranged into mild curiosity. "An outsider?" Edward sputtered incredulously. "Who exactly could this person be?" Travers cleared his throat again, choosing his words carefully. "I am not at liberty to disclose specifics, but the intended beneficiary is indeed someone Lord Blackwood has aided significantly in secret for many years." Percy forced a dismissive laugh, eyes darting nervously. "This is utterly absurd. A secret beneficiary? It sounds like something out of a sensationalist novel." "Nevertheless," Travers said firmly, "the will was legitimate and carefully prepared. Its disappearance jeopardizes Lord Blackwood's clear wishes." Miss Marple leaned forward gently, her soft voice breaking the tension. "Perhaps the disappearance itself indicates precisely how important and dangerous the revelation of this will might be." Lord Blackwood met her gaze gratefully. "Precisely, Miss Marple, which is why I invited you here. Your reputation precedes you." "Then perhaps," she continued gently, addressing the group, "we might retrace recent activities, examine more carefully the areas where such a document could have been securely hidden." Percy visibly bristled, but quickly masked his annoyance. "If you believe your amateur sleuthing could solve what clearly seems an inside family matter, by all means." Miss Marple smiled sweetly, unfazed by his derisive tone. Sometimes fresh eyes are precisely what's needed. After breakfast, Miss Marple discreetly approached Mr. Travers, requesting further details. He hesitated momentarily before confiding quietly, "Lord Blackwood was quite explicit about keeping the new will secret until his death. Only he and I knew its location." "And yet someone else discovered it," Miss Marple murmured thoughtfully. "Someone motivated enough to risk exposure." Travers nodded gravely. "Indeed, Miss Marple. Whoever is behind this is not merely ambitious, they are dangerous." Later, Miss Marple ventured back into the hall and found herself in the vast portrait gallery. Her gaze lingered on a particularly striking portrait of a young Lord Blackwood standing next to an unknown young man. Intrigued, she moved closer and noticed faint initials at the corner. T.H. As she pondered this mystery, footsteps echoed behind her. Turning swiftly, she saw Mrs. Jennings approaching hesitantly. "Mrs. Jennings," Miss Marple greeted gently, "perhaps you might assist me. Who is the young man in this portrait with Lord Blackwood?" The housekeeper paled visibly, glancing nervously around. That would be Thomas Harrington, she whispered, voice trembling. He disappeared many years ago under suspicious circumstances. Some say he was closer to Lord Blackwood than family. Miss Marple's curiosity deepened further, sensing a profound connection. Disappeared? How very troubling, she murmured. Indeed, Miss Marple, Mrs. Jennings whispered urgently, her voice dropping further. I fear history might repeat itself. Be cautious, please. As the housekeeper hurried away, Miss Marple considered this new revelation. Clearly, Thomas Harrington held answers, and perhaps his past was deeply intertwined with the present danger at Blackwood Hall. Miss Marple's resolve hardened further. She would unveil every hidden secret, no matter how deeply buried. Morning light filtered gently through the curtains as Miss Marple rose, her sleep disturbed by thoughts of secret passages and whispered threats. Upon descending to breakfast, she found Lord Blackwood alone, pale and weary. Good morning, Miss Marple, he greeted weakly. I hope our oddities haven't made your stay too uncomfortable. Quite the opposite, she replied kindly, though your estate is full of intrigue. Before more could be said, Mr. Travers, the family solicitor, arrived. A methodical man with sharp eyes, he carried troubling news. The recently revised will had vanished. It had been locked away securely, known only to him and Lord Blackwood. The family soon entered, Percy, Olivia, Edward, and Amelia, each reacting differently when the missing will was mentioned. Tension rippled through the room as Travers revealed that the new will left Blackwood Hall not to the family, but to an unnamed outsider. Outrage and disbelief followed. An outsider? Edward exclaimed. Who would he choose over us? Travers gave nothing away. Miss Marple, watching closely, saw Percy's tightly masked reaction and noted the sudden silence that fell across the room. After breakfast, Miss Marple spoke privately with Travers, who admitted only he and Lord Blackwood knew where the will had been stored. Whoever took it, he said grimly, did so with purpose and skill. Later, wandering the portrait gallery, Miss Marple's attention fell on a painting of a young Lord Blackwood beside an unfamiliar man. The initials T.H. were faintly visible. As she examined the portrait, Mrs. Jennings approached. That's Thomas Harrington, the housekeeper whispered nervously. He disappeared long ago. Some say he was closer to Lord Blackwood than his own family. A disappearance, Miss Marple repeated softly. How troubling indeed. Mrs. Jennings glanced around fearfully. I believe the past is returning. Be careful, Miss Marple. As the housekeeper hurried away, Miss Marple stood in quiet thought. The secrets of Blackwood Hall were deeper than she had imagined, and growing more dangerous with every step closer to the truth. Miss Marple found herself once again drawn to the sprawling library of Blackwood Hall, a room that exuded both history and secrecy. Tall shelves lined the walls, filled with meticulously arranged volumes, their spines worn by time and hands long past. The faint scent of aged paper and polished wood lingered in the air, comforting yet mysterious. The evening sun was fading, casting elongated shadows that danced eerily across the marble floor. As she walked along the shelves, Miss Marple observed a curious detail. One particular section appeared conspicuously dust-free compared to the rest. Intrigued, she examined the area closely, running her finger along the edges of several volumes. It was clear someone had recently disturbed these books. She paused, hearing a faint muffled sound emanating from somewhere deeper within the library. Moving quietly, she followed the noise to the back wall, noticing a faint glow seeping through a gap behind an imposing shelf filled with old law tomes. Her heartbeat quickened slightly. She was certain she was nearing something significant. Carefully, she reached forward and tugged lightly at one of the heavy volumes. The entire shelf moved slightly with a soft click, revealing a small hidden compartment concealed behind the books. Nestled within lay an aged letter, yellowed and brittle. Miss Marple took it carefully into her hands, feeling her pulse quicken with anticipation. Unfolding the paper gently, she peered at the faded handwriting, meticulously penned in elegant script. It read, "To whomever discovers this, know that injustice has been done. A will exists, hidden away, intended for Thomas Harrington. It has been concealed, falsified perhaps, to protect family interests at the cost of truth. Beware those who claim kinship, for their hearts may be blackened by greed." Her mind raced with connections. Thomas Harrington, the mysterious young man from the portrait, was now undeniably linked to the missing will. Clearly, his fate and that of Blackwood Hall were intricately woven together, obscured by time and deception. A sudden creak behind her made her turn swiftly. Amelia stood near the doorway, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and surprise. "Miss Marple," she whispered urgently, stepping quickly into the room. "You must put that away quickly. If someone sees you—" Miss Marple smoothly folded the letter and tucked it discreetly into her sleeve. "Amelia, what do you know of Thomas Harrington?" Amelia hesitated, visibly troubled. "Very little. My family never speaks openly of him, but I've overheard enough. They say he vanished without explanation, but there were rumors, dark rumors about betrayal and greed." "And the will?" Miss Marple probed gently. Amelia glanced nervously toward the corridor before lowering her voice further. "My uncle had drawn it in Harrington's favor, I'm certain. He often spoke warmly of Thomas, something which angered Percy deeply. Percy believed the estate belonged solely within the bloodline." Miss Marple nodded, understanding dawning on her face. "And now the will is missing, vanished just as Thomas Harrington did years ago. Perhaps history is repeating itself indeed." Amelia grasped Miss Marple's arm lightly, eyes pleading. "Please be careful. Whoever is responsible won't hesitate to remove any threats." Miss Marple patted Amelia's hand reassuringly. "Rest assured, my dear. Truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply buried." As Amelia quickly left, Miss Marple remained in the library, her thoughts carefully piecing together the fragments of information she had gathered. The shadows seemed deeper now, filled with whispers of past treacheries and silent warnings. Lost in contemplation, she hardly noticed the approach of Lord Blackwood until he softly cleared his throat. "Miss Marple, forgive my intrusion. Have you discovered something of interest here?" "Indeed, Lord Blackwood," she replied candidly, sensing sincerity in his concerned gaze. "This library holds secrets, as do all great houses, but some secrets are more dangerous than others." He sighed deeply, a heavy weariness settling over his features. "Thomas Harrington was like a son to me. I wished only to ensure his safety and future. His disappearance nearly destroyed me, and now, with the new will gone, I fear the past is haunting me again." "Lord Blackwood," Miss Marple began carefully, "do you suspect anyone in particular?" His expression darkened momentarily. "I have suspected many, Miss Marple, including those closest to me, but suspicion alone is useless without proof." "Proof," Miss Marple repeated thoughtfully, "may be closer than we realize. This letter," she said, producing the document discreetly, "suggests a conspiracy at the heart of your family, one that stretches back many years." Lord Blackwood's eyes narrowed slightly as he examined the note. "Then my fears are confirmed. Thomas was betrayed from within this household, and now history seeks to repeat itself." Miss Marple met his troubled gaze directly. "Trust, Lord Blackwood, that we will uncover the truth. Secrets, no matter how skillfully hidden, rarely stay concealed forever." Lord Blackwood nodded solemnly. "With your help, perhaps justice will finally find its place here at Blackwood Hall." As darkness enveloped the library, Miss Marple felt resolute. The shadowy secrets within Blackwood Hall would be revealed, one carefully unveiled truth at a time. As twilight deepened, Miss Marple found herself drawn once more to the expansive, shadowed library of Blackwood Hall, a chamber steeped in quiet dignity and layered, unmistakably, with secrets. Towering shelves reached up to a coffered ceiling, filled with volumes whose cracked leather spines bore the weight of generations. The air smelled faintly of polished oak, aged parchment, and something older still, memories too stubborn to fade. She moved slowly, reverently, her gloved hand brushing along the edges of books as if they might whisper to her if properly coaxed. One section, she noticed, was curiously clean, oddly untouched by the fine layer of dust that dulled the rest. It stood out, not overtly, but enough to catch the eye of someone accustomed to observing what others overlooked. Miss Marple's fingers hovered over the unusually tidy shelf. She touched a spine, then another, each slightly askew. The dust-free surface spoke plainly. Someone had disturbed this area recently. Her sharp gaze caught a faint glow bleeding from behind the shelving. A subtle sound, low, muffled, echoed faintly through the stillness. Carefully, she tugged at one of the weighty law tomes, expecting resistance. Instead, the shelf gave way with a soft click and swung outward, revealing a small hidden recess. Nestled inside was a single yellowed envelope. She drew it out slowly, hands steady despite the racing of her pulse. Inside, a letter, creased with age but preserved, lay waiting, its ink fading but still legible. To whomever discovers this, know that injustice has been done. A will exists, hidden away, intended for Thomas Harrington. It has been concealed, falsified perhaps, to protect family interests at the cost of truth. Beware those who claim kinship, for their hearts may be blackened by greed. Miss Marple's breath caught. So it was true. Thomas Harrington, the young man from the portrait, the one whose name stirred dread and silence, had been meant to inherit Blackwood Hall, and someone had seen to it that he never did. A faint creak broke the hush. She turned quickly, slipping the letter into her sleeve just as Amelia appeared in the doorway, pale and wide-eyed. "Miss Marple," she whispered urgently, "you shouldn't be in here. If someone finds you—" "I assure you, my dear," Miss Marple replied gently, "my presence here is most necessary. What do you know of Thomas Harrington?" Amelia hesitated, clearly torn between fear and a desperate need to speak. "Very little, but enough. My family never discusses him. I've heard whispers of betrayal, of jealousy. My uncle cared for Thomas deeply. Percy hated that. He believed the estate should stay within the bloodline." "And the missing will?" Miss Marple probed. "I'm certain it was meant for Thomas," Amelia whispered. "My uncle spoke of making things right. Then the will disappeared, just like Thomas did." Miss Marple nodded, her suspicions sharpening into clarity. "And now someone fears that the past might be uncovered." Amelia gripped her arm. "Please, be cautious. The people here, some of them, are dangerous." Miss Marple gave her a comforting pat. "Do not worry, my dear. The truth has a curious habit of finding its way to the surface." Once Amelia had gone, Miss Marple lingered in thought, when a soft cough alerted her to another presence. Lord Blackwood stood near, the lines on his face deepening as he approached. "I had hoped you might find something," he said quietly. "This room holds more ghosts than most." Miss Marple held out the letter. "It seems one of them left behind a message." As he read the words, his expression shifted from sorrow to grim realization. "Then my worst fears are confirmed," he said hoarsely. "Thomas, he was more than a ward to me. He was my closest confidant. I intended to make amends for the injustice done to him, but now I wonder if it is too late." "Not if we act," Miss Marple said gently. "Someone went to great lengths to bury the truth, but no deception is flawless. We'll find the cracks." Lord Blackwood's gaze steadied. "You believe Percy is behind this?" "I believe Percy is at the center of it," she said calmly, "but I suspect he was not alone." Lord Blackwood nodded slowly. "Then let us begin, Miss Marple, before another disappearance joins our family history." As night descended fully upon the estate, the library darkened, but within Miss Marple's mind, the threads were beginning to weave together. The truth was near, waiting behind portraits, between pages, and beneath the silence that ruled Blackwood Hall. Miss Marple awoke the next morning with renewed purpose, her thoughts buzzing with revelations from the library. Sunlight filtered softly into her room, yet it did little to dispel the lingering unease from the previous evening. Dressing quickly, she joined the family at breakfast, observing silently as they interacted with guarded politeness. Each glance, each whispered word, held unspoken suspicion. After breakfast, Miss Marple took a leisurely stroll through the vast gardens, her sharp eyes noting every detail of the carefully manicured lawns and blooming flower beds. Near an ancient oak, she observed Amelia speaking quietly but urgently with Tom, the young gardener she'd noticed earlier. She approached discreetly, catching only snippets of their anxious conversation. "I told you, Amelia, it's too dangerous," Tom murmured fervently. "We shouldn't discuss this openly." Amelia's response was a frightened whisper. "Tom, if they find out about your connection to Uncle and Thomas Harrington, you could be in real danger." Their conversation ceased abruptly as they spotted Miss Marple. Amelia forced a nervous smile. "Good morning, Miss Marple. Enjoying our gardens?" "Indeed," Miss Marple replied gently. "They are quite splendid. But forgive me, I couldn't help overhearing. Your uncle and Thomas Harrington seem to be at the heart of many whispered conversations lately." Tom shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting nervously. Amelia, however, seemed desperate to confide. "Yes," she admitted softly. "My uncle trusted Thomas deeply, and Tom here—" "Amelia," Tom warned urgently, "please." It's all right, Tom, Miss Marple reassured warmly. Secrets kept in fear only grow more dangerous. Perhaps it's time the truth was brought into the light. Tom sighed, nodding reluctantly. Very well. Lord Blackwood secretly supported my family for years. Thomas Harrington was my father. He disappeared under suspicious circumstances when I was just a boy. Miss Marple's eyes softened sympathetically. Then you must indeed be cautious. Whoever was responsible for Thomas Harrington's disappearance will go to great lengths to protect their secret. Tom glanced around nervously. I've always suspected Percy knew more than he let on, but without evidence, my suspicions remain only suspicions. Evidence, Miss Marple murmured thoughtfully, is precisely what we need. Determined to find concrete proof, Miss Marple decided to revisit the area near the hidden compartment she discovered the night before. Quietly entering the library once again, she meticulously examined the section of wall that concealed the secret space. Her careful inspection revealed faint scratch marks on the floor, a telltale sign the shelving had been moved repeatedly. Pressing gently against the wood paneling nearby, she felt a subtle give. With steady resolve, she pushed harder, and to her astonishment, the wall moved, revealing a narrow, dimly lit passageway. Her heart quickened in excitement as she stepped cautiously into the secret corridor. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of disuse, and Miss Marple advanced slowly, her footsteps muffled by the thick dust covering the stone floor. The passage twisted and turned, leading her deeper beneath Blackwood Hall. She paused occasionally, listening intently for any signs she might not be alone, but heard only silence. Eventually, the corridor widened into a small chamber, faintly illuminated by shafts of light filtering through a grate above. On one side stood an old, iron-bound chest. Miss Marple approached it carefully, lifting the heavy lid. Inside, her eyes widened upon discovering several documents, clearly very old. Among these papers, carefully hidden, lay another letter bearing Lord Blackwood's distinctive handwriting. With trembling hands, Miss Marple opened it. To whoever finds this, I have made many mistakes, but none weigh heavier upon my conscience than what was done to Thomas Harrington. Percy, driven by greed, arranged Thomas's disappearance, ensuring my favoured heir would never inherit Blackwood Hall. If you read this, justice has eluded me, and my efforts have been insufficient. Please, whoever you are, bring the truth forward. Miss Marple carefully tucked the letter safely away. As she turned to leave, a sudden scraping sound echoed behind her. Quickly concealing herself in the shadows, she saw Lady Olivia enter the chamber, her expression intense as she moved directly to the chest. Discovering it empty, she gasped softly, panic evident in her eyes. Miss Marple stepped forward calmly, confronting her. Looking for something, Lady Olivia? Startled, Lady Olivia spun around, fear briefly flickering across her face before it hardened into cold resolve. Miss Marple, she said coolly, you shouldn't be here. Neither should you, Miss Marple countered evenly, but perhaps your intentions here might explain much of what's been troubling this household. Lady Olivia hesitated briefly before her shoulders slumped in defeat. Very well. Percy involved me against my better judgment. He insisted Thomas Harrington was a threat to our family's rightful inheritance. I didn't agree, but loyalty to family clouded my judgment. Your loyalty was misplaced, Miss Marple said gently, but truth can still prevail. Lady Olivia nodded, visibly shaken. What should I do now? Tell Lord Blackwood everything, Miss Marple advised firmly. He deserves the truth, no matter how painful. Emerging from the passageway together, they returned swiftly to the hall. Miss Marple arranged an urgent gathering in the drawing room, calling all family members and Mr. Travers. In front of the assembled group, Lady Olivia recounted everything: the plot Percy orchestrated, Thomas Harrington's tragic fate, and the missing will intended for Tom. Percy's face darkened with fury, but with everyone now aware of his actions, he remained silent, his plans collapsing around him. Lord Blackwood listened gravely, sorrow etched deeply in his features. When Olivia finished, he spoke softly yet firmly. Percy, you have brought dishonor and pain upon our family. Justice must be done. Mr. Travers, taking command of the situation, quickly dispatched messages to local authorities. Miss Marple, feeling both relief and sadness at the revelations, retreated to a quiet corner, her thoughts contemplative. As evening descended once again upon Blackwood Hall, Tom approached her with sincere gratitude. Thank you, Miss Marple. Without you, the truth would have remained buried. The truth, Miss Marple replied warmly, is never truly buried, Tom. It simply waits patiently for someone brave enough to uncover it. Standing together in quiet reflection, they watched as authorities arrived, ready to address the long-standing wrongs. Miss Marple knew justice had finally begun its course, and the shadowy secrets of Blackwood Hall were at last being fully revealed. Miss Marple awoke with purpose. The discoveries of the previous evening, Thomas Harrington's letter and Lord Blackwood's confession, made one thing clear. The truth had been buried far too long. Though sunlight streamed into her room, a shadow of unease lingered. At breakfast, tension crackled beneath polite words. The family exchanged guarded glances, each weighed down by secrets. Later, walking in the garden, Miss Marple noticed Amelia speaking with Tom, the young gardener. Their urgent tones caught her ear. "It's too dangerous," Tom warned. "If they find out the truth." Amelia turned to Miss Marple, flustered. "Good morning. The garden is lovely, isn't it?" "It is," Miss Marple said gently. "But it seems the past still grows here." Amelia finally confessed. Tom was Thomas Harrington's son. Lord Blackwood had quietly supported him. "We believe Percy was involved in Thomas's disappearance," Tom said softly. Miss Marple nodded. "Then it's time to find proof." Back in the library, she examined the hidden compartment again. Faint scratches on the floor revealed a concealed panel. Pressing it, she uncovered a hidden passage leading to a dusty underground chamber. There, inside an iron chest, she found old documents and a final letter from Lord Blackwood. "Percy arranged Thomas's disappearance. I failed to stop him. If this letter is found, please bring the truth to light." Just as she tucked the letter away, Lady Olivia entered and froze upon seeing the empty chest. "Miss Marple," she gasped. "You were looking for this," Miss Marple said evenly. Defeated, Olivia confessed. "Percy manipulated her, claiming Thomas was a threat to the family. I regret it now." "Then help me correct it," Miss Marple urged. Together, they returned to the hall. A family meeting was called. Olivia revealed everything: Percy's plot, Thomas's fate, and the stolen will. Percy, exposed, remained silent. Lord Blackwood, heartbroken, spoke softly. "You've shamed this family." Mr. Travers summoned the authorities. Justice, at last, had begun its course. That evening, Tom approached Miss Marple. "Thank you for everything." "The truth," she said, "is patient. It always finds a way." As darkness fell, the secrets of Blackwood Hall were finally brought into the light. The household of Blackwood Hall was cloaked in uneasy silence as the late hour approached. Shadows stretched languidly across hallways and chambers, the oppressive stillness occasionally punctuated by the distant chiming of the grandfather clock in the main hall. Miss Marple sat quietly in her room, her mind meticulously piecing together every clue and revelation that had surfaced during her stay. With purposeful resolve, she decided the time for confrontation had come. Drawing her shawl around her shoulders, she moved softly along the dimly lit corridors, making her way toward the drawing room. Earlier, she discreetly instructed the servants to gather all family members precisely at midnight. The urgency of her request had been carefully emphasized, and she was confident none would risk absenting themselves. Entering the room, she found Lord Blackwood seated near the fireplace, his expression thoughtful and troubled. He looked up as she entered, nodding gravely. "Miss Marple, do you truly believe the guilty party will be revealed tonight?" "I do," she assured gently. "Secrets thrive only in darkness. Once exposed, they lose their power." Gradually, the others arrived, casting wary glances around the room as they seated themselves. Percy entered last, his face rigid, clearly apprehensive but defiant. Lady Olivia avoided his gaze completely, sitting stiffly next to Amelia, whose anxious eyes darted continuously toward Tom. Edward lingered near the window, feigning indifference. Miss Marple positioned herself strategically, facing the entire assembly. "I thank you all for coming at this late hour. Recent events have shed considerable light on matters previously hidden within Blackwood Hall. Now, it is time the truth was openly confronted." Percy scoffed dismissively, folding his arms defensively. "And what supposed truths have you unearthed, Miss Marple?" "Many," Miss Marple replied calmly, undeterred by his hostility. "Most notably, the truth about Thomas Harrington's disappearance and the deliberate concealment of Lord Blackwood's will." Percy's expression hardened, a dangerous glint entering his eyes. Ridiculous accusations. You have no proof of such things. Proof, Miss Marple echoed softly, producing the letter from Lord Blackwood she'd discovered earlier. Proof lies here, clearly stating that you orchestrated Thomas Harrington's disappearance. Your cousin's letter explicitly implicates you, Percy. Gasps filled the room, heads turning sharply toward Percy. Lord Blackwood stared sorrowfully at his cousin. Percy, how could you betray family in such a way? Percy sneered, his veneer of civility finally crumbling. Family? Thomas Harrington was no family. He was nothing but an interloper who wormed his way into your favor. This estate belonged to me by blood, by right. Miss Marple intervened gently, yet firmly. You believed yourself wronged, Percy, yet your actions have only brought harm and grief. Lady Olivia suddenly stood, her voice shaking but resolute. It's true. Percy convinced me to help conceal the truth. He manipulated my loyalty, promising no one would ever learn of Thomas's fate or the missing will. Lady Olivia, Percy hissed, visibly shaken by her betrayal. How dare you? How dare I? Lady Olivia retorted sharply. How dare you deceive and manipulate me into aiding your crimes? Edward, previously silent, now spoke bitterly. Percy has always been persuasive, convincing us all he acted in the family's interest, but his only interest was ever his own. Percy turned desperately toward Lord Blackwood, his voice wavering between anger and panic. Surely you can't believe these accusations without concrete proof. Words alone do not condemn a man. Miss Marple raised her voice clearly, commanding everyone's attention. Indeed, Percy, words alone might not suffice, but consider your actions. The secret passage, known only to a select few, allowed you to remove evidence and tamper with Lord Blackwood's possessions. Yet, you neglected one vital detail, the letter, hidden and waiting patiently to surface and condemn your deeds. Percy's defiance shattered visibly, replaced by desperate fear. You cannot possibly prove I was in that passage. But we can, Tom declared resolutely, stepping forward bravely. I saw you, Percy. I followed you the night the will disappeared. Percy's eyes blazed with fury. And you think they'll believe the word of a gardener over mine? We will, Lord Blackwood announced firmly, rising to his feet. For I know Tom's honor, just as I have long suspected your deceit. Your greed blinded you, Percy, leading you to betrayal and ruin. Silence filled the room, tense and expectant. Miss Marple observed Percy closely, noting the moment his bravado finally crumbled completely. He sank heavily into a chair, his eyes vacant and defeated. I never intended harm, only to reclaim what should have been mine. Greed, Miss Marple stated softly, rarely acknowledges the harm it inflicts. Lord Blackwood turned to Miss Marple gratefully. Without your perseverance, we might never have unraveled this tangled web. I am forever in your debt. Miss Marple smiled gently, her eyes twinkling warmly. The truth was always here, Lord Blackwood, simply awaiting discovery. As the clock struck 1, authorities arrived promptly, alerted by Mr. Travers earlier. Percy was escorted from the hall without resistance, his spirit clearly broken. The remaining family members remained seated quietly, absorbing the profound revelations and consequences of the evening's confrontation. As the night deepened, Miss Marple sat with Lord Blackwood by the fire, discussing quietly the events that had unfolded. He confided in her, recalling happier memories with Thomas Harrington, the genuine affection and trust he'd once shared with him. I hoped justice would find its way eventually, he murmured, eyes glistening. But I never anticipated the betrayal would cut so deeply. Miss Marple placed a comforting hand on his arm. Healing begins with truth, Lord Blackwood. Your strength in facing this openly sets a path for peace. Lord Blackwood nodded slowly, taking comfort in her words. You are wise indeed, Miss Marple. We are fortunate you came to Blackwood Hall. As dawn approached, illuminating Blackwood Hall in gentle hues, Miss Marple reflected quietly upon her time here. Truth had triumphed over deception, justice had been served, and the long-hidden secrets finally lay bare. Peace, she knew, had at last returned to Blackwood Hall. The household of Blackwood Hall was cloaked in uneasy silence as midnight approached. Shadows stretched long across polished floors and ancient walls, broken only by the somber ticking of the grandfather clock. Miss Marple sat alone in her chamber, mentally assembling the final pieces of the mystery she had so patiently unraveled. The moment for truth had arrived. Wrapping her shawl firmly around her shoulders, she descended the dim corridors and made her way to the drawing room. Earlier, she had requested the servants to summon all family members at precisely midnight. There would be no more secrets after tonight. Lord Blackwood waited by the hearth, eyes clouded by sorrow and apprehension. "Miss Marple," he said quietly, "do you believe this gathering will finally expose the one responsible?" "I do," she replied gently. "The darkness has protected deceit for too long. It's time for the light of truth." One by one, the family arrived. Amelia and Tom sat together, anxious but resolute. Lady Olivia entered stiffly, her face pale. Edward lingered near the window with practiced detachment. Percy arrived last, his jaw tight, his eyes glinting with forced composure. Miss Marple stood before them with quiet authority. "Thank you for coming. The events of the past days and years have culminated in truths long buried, but tonight they must be faced." Percy scoffed. "And what wild accusations do you intend to present, Miss Marple?" "Not wild," she replied calmly. "Simply long overdue. The disappearance of Thomas Harrington, the stolen will, the betrayal of Lord Blackwood's trust. All roads lead to one person, you, Mr. Blackwood." She produced the letter Lord Blackwood had written and concealed years ago, implicating Percy directly. Gasps echoed. Even Olivia averted her gaze. Lord Blackwood looked at his cousin, heartbroken. "You orchestrated Thomas's disappearance. For what? Greed." "He was never one of us," Percy shouted, rage and panic cracking through. "He manipulated you. He would have stolen everything that was mine by right." Lady Olivia stood, voice trembling. "You used me, Percy. You said no one would ever know, but I helped you hide something unforgivable." Edward spoke next, his usual apathy stripped away. "He made us all believe his lies. We were pawns in his ambition." Miss Marple nodded. "But the truth finds a way. Tom saw you near the passage when the will vanished, and the letter, it was the last piece." Tom stepped forward. "I saw you, Percy. You didn't know I followed you that night." "You expect them to believe you?" Percy barked. "We do," Lord Blackwood said firmly. "Tom has more honor in him than you ever did." Percy sank into his chair, defeated. "I only wanted what I was owed." "Greed," Miss Marple said softly, "always believes it is owed something." Moments later, the doors opened. The authorities, summoned earlier by Mr. Travers, entered quietly. Percy stood but offered no resistance. His defiance had finally crumbled. As the family sat in stunned silence, Miss Marple joined Lord Blackwood by the fire. He spoke of Thomas Harrington, of loyalty, love, and a legacy nearly destroyed by betrayal. "Justice has come," he said, "but it costs so much." "Justice often does," Miss Marple murmured, "but it also brings peace." And as dawn broke, casting soft light over Blackwood Hall, peace, at long last, had returned. In the days following Percy's arrest, a tangible sense of relief swept through Blackwood Hall. Although shadowed by recent events, life began cautiously to return to normal. Miss Marple observed these changes quietly, noting each subtle shift in the household's atmosphere. It pleased her to see Amelia and Tom speaking openly now, their conversations free from fear. Edward seemed subdued, yet thoughtful, his previously indifferent demeanor giving way to introspective silence. Lord Blackwood, while deeply affected by the betrayal, appeared relieved that justice had finally been delivered. Miss Marple often found him seated quietly by the window, gazing pensively across the estate grounds. One afternoon, he turned to her with genuine warmth in his eyes. "Miss Marple, your presence has been more valuable than I can possibly express." "Thank you, Lord Blackwood," she replied gently, "but I merely helped bring clarity to truths already present." He smiled wistfully. "Truths I should have confronted long ago. Thomas Harrington deserved better, and it pains me deeply that justice came so late for him." "Yet it came," Miss Marple reminded him softly. "That alone is significant." Later that day, Mr. Travers arrived at the hall bearing important news. He gathered the remaining family members in the drawing room, his expression a blend of solemnity and satisfaction. "I've been in communication with the authorities." Percy confessed fully, confirming his role in both the disappearance of Thomas Harrington and the concealment of Lord Blackwood's will. Relief was visible in every face, though tinged with sorrow for the deep wounds inflicted by betrayal. "And what of the original will?" Lord Blackwood inquired quietly. "Recovered," Mr. Travers assured him. Hidden deep within Percy's quarters, he had neither the courage nor the heart to destroy it. The terms are exactly as you dictated, Lord Blackwood. Lord Blackwood nodded solemnly. Then it is settled. Tom, you are to inherit Blackwood Hall and its holdings. It was always meant for you, as your father would have wished. Tom stood, visibly moved by the gesture, his voice steady yet emotional. Lord Blackwood, I am deeply honored, but please know, my only wish is to honor the memory of my father and to preserve the integrity of this estate. I have no doubt of your intentions, Lord Blackwood replied warmly. Your father would be immensely proud. As the meeting concluded, Miss Marple watched the interactions closely, satisfied that justice had truly been served. The family dispersed slowly, each member reflecting on the profound events of the past few days. That evening, a celebratory dinner was held. A quiet yet sincere acknowledgement of justice restored and new beginnings forged. Miss Marple sat near Lord Blackwood, sharing observations and small smiles, gratified by the newfound peace. After dinner, Amelia approached Miss Marple, her eyes filled with gratitude and respect. Miss Marple, I cannot thank you enough for what you've done. Without your wisdom, our family might never have known peace. Miss Marple patted Amelia's hand affectionately. My dear, peace was always possible. You merely needed someone to remind you it was within your grasp. Later that night, unable to sleep, Miss Marple wandered quietly through the darkened halls. The estate felt lighter, the oppressive gloom lifted, replaced by a serene quietude. Passing by the library, she stepped inside, drawn to the comforting presence of books. She moved silently among the shelves, her eyes drifting over the now familiar volumes. She paused near the secret compartment she'd discovered earlier, reflecting briefly on the hidden truths it had sheltered. She smiled softly, pleased that secrets no longer ruled these walls. Her thoughts were interrupted by the gentle footsteps of Lord Blackwood. Couldn't sleep either, Miss Marple? He inquired softly. She smiled gently. Indeed, the mind does tend to linger on such eventful days. Yes, he agreed quietly, stepping closer. I find myself thinking about Thomas Harrington often tonight. He would have admired your courage and insight immensely. He must have been an extraordinary man, Miss Marple observed thoughtfully. He was, Lord Blackwood confirmed quietly. Wise beyond his years and kind without limit. I see much of him in Tom. They stood quietly for a moment, honoring the memory of the past. Eventually, Lord Blackwood sighed deeply, turning toward Miss Marple with profound sincerity. You have restored more than justice, Miss Marple. You have restored hope. She inclined her head modestly. Hope is never truly lost, Lord Blackwood. It merely awaits rediscovery. Days later, as Miss Marple prepared to depart Blackwood Hall, she felt genuine satisfaction in her heart. The family gathered warmly at the front steps, their goodbyes heartfelt and sincere. Amelia embraced her affectionately, whispering words of deep gratitude. Edward offered a quiet nod. His demeanor changed significantly, now serious and contemplative. Lady Olivia approached cautiously, her expression sincere. I deeply regret my part in all this, Miss Marple. Thank you for bringing truth to light, despite the pain it brought. Miss Marple held her gaze reassuringly. Truth often requires courage, Lady Olivia. Courage you've clearly shown. Lastly, Tom stepped forward, earnest and respectful. Miss Marple, I promise to uphold the integrity and honor you've helped restore here. I have no doubt you will, she replied warmly. Your father would indeed be proud. As the Bentley moved slowly down the driveway, Miss Marple glanced back at the now peaceful Blackwood Hall, bathed in the gentle afternoon sunlight. The estate stood firm, freed at last from shadows of secrecy and betrayal. Justice, she knew, had been fully restored, and the future now held promise rather than uncertainty. Comforted by this knowledge, Miss Marple settled back comfortably, a gentle smile touching her lips. Her visit had not been merely about unearthing hidden truths, but about healing deep wounds and guiding others toward reconciliation. Satisfied that her quiet determination had once again made a significant difference, she allowed herself a moment of quiet contentment, ready now to return to her own peaceful home in St. Mary Mead, knowing her work at Blackwood Hall was complete. In the days after Percy's arrest, Blackwood Hall slowly began to breathe again. Though recent events had left emotional marks, a cautious peace settled over the estate. Miss Marple observed the changes quietly. Amelia and Tom now spoke freely, unburdened by fear. Edward, once indifferent, had grown pensive, while Lady Olivia moved with quiet humility. Lord Blackwood, though saddened, appeared relieved. Miss Marple often found him by the window, deep in thought. One afternoon, he turned to her. "Miss Marple, I can never thank you enough." She smiled gently. "Truth was already here, Lord Blackwood. I merely helped uncover it." Mr. Travers soon brought news from the authorities. Percy has confessed, both to Thomas Harrington's disappearance and to hiding the will. The original document was found in his quarters, untouched. Lord Blackwood nodded solemnly. "Then it's time. Tom, the estate is yours. It was always meant to be." Tom, moved, replied humbly, "I'll honor my father's name and this house. That is my only wish." That evening, a quiet dinner was held. There was no celebration, only a shared sense of relief and a subtle return of warmth. After the meal, Amelia thanked Miss Marple privately. "You've given us a future. We'll never forget it." "That future was always within reach," Miss Marple replied kindly. "You simply needed courage." Late that night, she wandered the halls once more, drawn back to the library. There, beside the hidden compartment, she reflected in silence. Lord Blackwood soon joined her. "I think of Thomas often," he said quietly. "I failed him." "You sought justice in the end," she said. "That matters." "You've restored more than justice," he said. "You've restored hope." Hope, Miss Marple replied, was merely waiting to be remembered. When the day of her departure arrived, the family gathered to bid her farewell. Each offered heartfelt thanks, Amelia's warm embrace, Edward's respectful nod, Lady Olivia's sincere regret. Tom spoke last, promising to honor all she had helped restore. As her car departed down the long drive, Miss Marple looked back one final time. Blackwood Hall stood tall and calm, no longer burdened by shadows. Justice had found its place, and with it, peace. She leaned back in her seat with quiet satisfaction. Another mystery solved, not just of crime, but of the human heart.